Hi guys, welcome back to Binge Watch Britney. Today we are going to be covering Nashville Season 2. Something that I didn't talk about when I was doing the video for Season 1 is that I really like how Scarlett dresses. I know that she kind of has that bohemian, kind of like country look to her, and I really like that style. Obviously, I don't dress like that in my everyday life, but that is something that I do feel kind of like connected to, and I really love just how she's wearing these feminine pieces. They look really good on her. Obviously, she's really short, so the stuff that she is wearing is more flattering on a shorter person. I'm taller, I'm 6'1", so everything is just gonna hit me differently. And so, yeah, I wish I could dress like that, but I just wanted to go ahead and point out that I really do love the way that she dresses in this show. So let's just go ahead and get into season 2. We ended season 1 with the car crash with Deacon and Raina. Raina has been in a coma for 2 weeks, and we have Deacon who is in jail because he's feeling really guilty for basically he didn't cause the accident, but they were in the car because Raina didn't want to let him drive and stuff like that. And so he feels really guilty. His hand is messed up, and he has told everyone that he was the driver, and Teddy is intent on making him pay for this, and so he is really using his influence as mayor to have the court system really go at Deacon. And Deacon, because he feels guilty, he's not even wanting to defend himself. He's not even wanting to interact with his lawyer. He does have a court-appointed lawyer, and what's good about this lawyer, Megan, is that she's not one of those lawyers who just does pro bono cases or whatever, or court-appointed cases because she's new to the job or whatever. She's actually a really good lawyer, and so she puts in the effort and the time to like figure out what's going on and if Deacon is in fact guilty. And so we do see her at some point able to prove that it was actually Raina who was driving, and she's able to prove this because of the bruises that Raina had. They indicate that she was the one driving. We do have Raina eventually waking up after like 2 weeks, and she is able to confirm herself that Deacon was not the driver, and so this is just more evidence to get Deacon out of jail. We also have Maddie, who's still mad at Raina over everything with Deacon and the lying and just not knowing the truth for so long. And so even though her mom has been through this stressful situation, she's still not quite on good terms with her mom. She's still punishing her, and so we see this a lot at the beginning of season 2. We also see Raina she is not willing to meet with Deacon. She feels like she doesn't want to be around him. She feels like the relationship is done just because of everything with the accident and how he reacted to finally finding out the truth about his daughter. And so she ends up finally meeting with him, and she gives him back the engagement ring that he had given to her. And we do see a flashback of the moment that he actually proposed to her. And I think that he was either drunk or high, and he, like the next day or whatever, he didn't remember proposing to her, and so it looked like she gave him the ring back, but then obviously for her to be giving him the ring back now, that means that she still had it. And so we see Deacon obviously just toss the ring after he got it back, just toss the ring into this little makeshift like little memorial area for where the crash actually happened. And I've really only seen that for when like people die or whatever. Obviously she was in a coma for 2 weeks, so people didn't know what the outcome was going to be, and so people were setting up memorials for her all over town. And then we had Juliet having her perform it, and then encouraging people to go to the hospital so that she could look good, obviously, in front of everyone for supporting Raina, and then also just giving Raina more fan support. We also see in that scene with Juliet coming to the hospital that she's able to interact with Maddie, and this is kind of forced on her because she's obviously just doing all of this for show, but Maddie ends up coming down, and Maddie's really happy to see Juliet because she's a fan of hers, and they've kind of gotten closer. And so she brings Juliet inside, and then she actually at some point ends up revealing to Juliet that Deacon is her father. The other thing that we have happening after Raina wakes up is that she tells Teddy, because in season one he had gone ahead and initiated wanting a divorce. They didn't go through with it, so she tells Teddy that even though they're going through this difficult time of her recovering, that it's confusing for them both being in the same house. It's confusing for the girls, and they just need to go ahead and move on and go through with their divorce. And we do see them signing paperwork and kind of being amicable about it. The other thing I want to talk about is Deacon's hand. So obviously Deacon is a guitar player, and his hand being in bad shape is not good. I thought it was his left hand, but now I'm not sure what hand it is. But either way, this affects his ability to play the guitar, and he is really giving up at this point. Scarlett is the one who has to really force him to kind of work through the pain that he's dealing with. He doesn't want to take medication for it because he doesn't obviously want to get addicted to anything again, and so he's really suffering through the pain that he's experiencing from his hand, and then he's not willing to do any real work in order to get his hand back in shape so that he can be the guitar player that he once was. And so we have Scarlett really keeping on him and forcing him to see this through. They do go to a specialist, and the specialist tells him what his chances are, so he really needs to be doing physical rehab of some sort, and he may not get back to 100% strength that he had prior to the accident. We also see Scarlett getting really frustrated with Deacon, and it's this moment where he's selling his guitars, and he is kind of like being mean to her for like taking care of him or whatever. And so this is the first one of the few times that we see Scarlett really get angry and kind of go back at the other person. And so she challenges him, and she's really trying to dig into why he's so upset, why he's acting like this, and what was it that made him give up 13 years of, or 13, I think it was 13 years of sobriety, and he ended up telling her that it was because he found out that Maddie was his daughter. The other thing that we have going on is there is a new man in charge at Edge Hill, and it's Jeff. And Jeff is a complete idiot, and he's not an idiot, but he's just a jerk, and he is just basically rubbing everyone the wrong way, and he's rude to Juliet because her album isn't doing well. Juliet is trying to change her sound, so she's initially marketed towards teens. She wants to have a more mature sound, and so her new material that she's released isn't really landing with either audience, and so Jeff calls her out on this, and he's just really a jerk to her. We do see him have a good initial conversation with Raina, but he ends up kind of backstabbing her and really just trying to do everything that she doesn't want to do with her career, with her new album, and things like that. And so we really do see a fight between the artist at Edge Hill and Jeff. As a result of this kind of battle between Jeff and Raina, Raina wants out. She wants out, and she really wants to focus on Highway 65. She has planned to sign Will, who is obviously a friend of Scarlett and Gunner, and Jeff poaches Will from Raina, and it's this conversation that he had with Gunner that kind of helped him make this decision. I think he realized it was Gunner Avery. He realized that basically the people who signed with Highway 65, I think that they are artists or something like that, and the people who sign with Edge Hill are the performers or whatever, because Will feels like he doesn't really write songs, but he's great at performing other people's songs, and so he makes his decision to go with Edge Hill off of this conversation that he has. We also see Juliet going to Alabama, so she's doing a lot behind the scenes to kind of play up her image, restore her image, and she goes to Alabama to go to the trailer park where she grew up, and we see her kind of legitimately reacting to the people that she getting reacquainted with, but she's also putting on a show and playing up her reaction to get the sales and the attention that she wants from the crowd. And we have Avery kind of seeing that she's manipulating everyone like this. And obviously, there's a little bit more deeper to it. She has such a wall up that she's kind of like not really wanting to think about anything too deeply, and she kind of just spins it into something that is to her advantage as far as helping her become more successful as an artist. While all of this is happening, we had again, that earlier conversation between Jeff and Juliet. And so, because Juliet is changing her sound, he brings in a runner up from some contest to kind of be the person geared and marketed towards that fan base that Juliet is kind of trying to leave behind. And that person's name is Layla. So next up, Juliet and Avery. So they end up going to this Wentworth event together. This is a rich couple, a relatively young and rich couple who is having a anniversary party, and they want Olivia to perform. Olivia chooses they want Juliet, I'm sorry, they want Juliet to perform, and Juliet is choosing to go to this event over something for Edge Hill just because I can't recall what the exact conflict was, but she used the fact that the Wentworths were very rich and powerful as her excuse to get out of that Edge Hill event because they were not people that you wanted to piss off. We do see this moment where Juliet and Avery are interacting, and they're kind of joined by, I guess, Charles, and Avery kind of goes off to the side and is doing his own thing. And we see Charles saying something about Juliet and her boyfriend, and so she clarifies, hey, he's not my boyfriend, he's just the hired help, basically. And Avery overhears this, and he doesn't like this because he's genuinely thinking that he's just there as her friend, but instead she treats him like someone on her payroll. He ends up quitting and not wanting to work for her, and he goes back to working at Bluebirds. Then on that same trip, we have Juliet sleeping with Charles. She's kind of going to her room, and Charles, I think, and his wife are interacting, and then he comes over to her, helps her go to her room, and then he starts kissing her, and then they hook up. And so they obviously get entangled, and as a result of them kind of hooking up, he sends her a car, and then he also later on invites her to a polo match, and obviously Juliet can buy her own whatever, and so she doesn't like the gesture of the car because she can buy her own car, so she sends it back. And then with the polo match, she doesn't really know who had invited her, so she shows up, and then she realizes that Charles invited her basically as a way to see her, have an excuse to see her, and she's really surprised by this because he's really aggressively pursuing her at this point. Then we find out that Charles and his wife Olivia, I think, they get into a fight, and so Charles ends up staying at like some penthouse, some hotel, and Olivia's like, I'm taking the jet, goodbye, you can find your own way home. And so he and Juliet meet up, and then they go up to the penthouse. They are intimate, and Olivia walks in and sees this happening. We then later on see a scene where basically Olivia pretends that Charles is basically into threesome and is kind of sharing her with his wife, which is not the case, and Juliet doesn't know this, and so she's really upset and offended by this because she's not really wanting to get involved with the wife that way. She is just wanting to hook up with Charles. And we do see, while all of this is happening at the polo match, we do see Raina giving Juliet the advice that messing with Charles is not a good look because of who their fan base is. It's mostly women, and so they're not going to take well to Juliet being the third party or the third person in someone else's marriage. We also have Juliet and Charles kind of still continuing to hang out together and become really friendly because he did initiate a divorce with his wife to prove to Juliet that he was really serious about being with her. And one of the things that happened while they are still like interacting is that she complained about some press person, some radio person who is really handsy. They call him Santa because the girls sit on his lap, whatever. And so she's basically venting to Charles that as a woman it's very hard in this industry because you are used for your looks in more ways than one. And so he uses his power to get Santa fired. And then Juliet doesn't like this, so she makes him rehire Santa. But then she uses this as a power play to basically let Santa know that she has the kind of connections that can get him fired. And she makes him start to treat the female talent better. The next thing that we have happening is that Teddy gets married to Peggy. So we know that Peggy approached him saying that she is pregnant, and this is why she didn't rat him out to the feds when they were kind of like looking into his financial situation. And then we do see that she had a miscarriage, but she doesn't tell Teddy that this happened. She still continues playing along that she's pregnant and that she's really excited about raising a kid together and all of this stuff. And so Teddy initially doesn't want to be involved at first. He just wants to send her money and make sure that she's good financially. But something causes him to like really give into that and play up the idea that they're going to be a real family. We do eventually have Teddy and Peggy getting married, and Maddie is forced to sing at their wedding, which is really annoying because she clearly expressed that she didn't want to do this. And I thought it was very annoying that Teddy and Peggy kind of expected Maddie to do it, and they were putting basically their own wants and feelings above a child. And that was very annoying because she shouldn't have been forced to sing at their wedding. We already had the incident where they went to some event and Maddie saw Peggy wearing her grandmother's ring and she was really confused by that and she was confrontational. She asked Peggy, "Why do you have my grandmother's ring? What's going on?" And so Maddie has been through a lot and Teddy, via Peggy, keeps adding more onto that. Then we see Teddy and Peggy kind of really grown in their relationship. At this point, in the season, it seems like Teddy hasn't really been to any of her appointments. He's just really trusting her and believing everything that she said. And so he does tell her that he wants to go to her next appointment. And I don't really know. Oh, so what happens is to get out of him coming to her next appointment, she fakes a miscarriage. So we see her with pork blood. We see her sitting in the bathroom crying, telling him that she had a miscarriage. And obviously, we know that she did have a miscarriage and she was never really able to properly grieve that because she was too busy pretending that she was pregnant. But that was a sad scene to see because miscarriage is definitely a intense and traumatizing situation that you can go through, especially if you're really, really excited about having a baby. The next thing that we have happening is we know that Gunnar and Scarlett have broken up at this point. We have Scarlett's friend from back home, Zoe, coming to Nashville to kind of make a name for herself. She is working at the Bluebird Cafe, and we have this moment where her and Gunnar hook up, and they carry on this kind of like affair is the wrong word, but they carry on their relationship. Zoe at first tries to like stop it because of Scarlett, but then she's like, "Oh, you're so amazing. I don't know why she gave you up, blah blah blah." And then she continues to pursue this relationship with Gunnar. At the same time that that's happening, we also have Avery and Scarlett kind of getting closer together, and they end up sleeping together and kind of working their way back to what you would assume is a relationship. The next thing that we have happening is Scarlett ends up being Luke Wheeler's opening act. This is a new musician who is coming on the scene. He's obviously a very successful country artist, and so it's a big deal for Luke. It's a big deal for Scarlett to be opening for him. Jeff also uses every opportunity he can to bully Scarlett. We did see something earlier on where Scarlett was having kind of like being prepared for prep, and they were really just trying to get her to get out of her like folksy mannerisms and behavior because it looks scattered when you see it on TV or whatever. That's the wording that they use, and so Layla ends up kind of confusing Scarlett and telling her, "Hey, be yourself," but this is obviously not what they want Scarlett to do. And so she has a moment where she gets on the red carpet and she says a little bit too much, brings up Deacon, and then obviously with the crash just happening, this just opens up a can of worms and they rush her off of the red carpet. And Will sees Layla's reaction to this and he's not a fan of hers at this point. So with that, we have different situations where Jeff is really bullying and pushing Scarlett to be something that she's not. And so he talks to her before her performance and just lets her know, "Hey, you have a lot of pressure on you, and this is obviously not a good pep talk." And so she had mentioned prior to this performance that she's about to have that there was something wrong with her ear monitors, and for whatever reason, they weren't going to fix it or they couldn't fix it. And so she goes to perform, and I think like the music is off and she starts singing, and then everyone's confused, and so she gets booed, they throw things at her, and Raina has to come onto the stage and calm the crowd down and say, "Hey, once they react to the fact that Raina's there, they calm down, they start cheering and stuff like that. And so she reintroduces Scarlett, lets her finish her song, and then Scarlett kind of just has to deal with all of that. There is a conversation between Raina and Deacon about whether or not Scarlett is ready for this kind of attention and exposure, but Deacon doesn't think that she is, but Raina tells him that she just has to push through it. We do see Scarlett kind of proving Raina right, because the next night that she performs the same song, but she has a completely different energy about her. She really gets into kind of like the rock lifestyle of performing, and she's animated and all over the stage and all of that. And so she did have a really good performance, but we do see her later on go into her room and crying herself to sleep because this is not what she wants, but she feels like she just has to play along because she doesn't want to let Raina down. Next, we have Raina. She's made it very clear that she wants out of Edgehill because they just don't value her as an artist the way that they did at the beginning of her career. And so she really believes in her new album. And as a result of the accident, she cannot sing. And so she's put in different situations where she's expected to sing, but she's able to get out of it by plugging Highway 65 and kind of like bringing Scarlett in to sing or something like that. And so she's really just trying to delay the release of her new material, her new album, until her voice, I guess, is in a better state, because once her album is done, she's going to be expected to basically sing live, and if she can't do that, then it's going to be a big issue. And so she's using the fact that the album isn't ready to give herself more time. While she is trying to buy herself out of her contract, she had initially planned to use her father's money to buy herself out of her contract. She needed $20 million. Lamar ended up getting arrested before she could actually buy herself out, and she told Jeff to his face that she was going to buy herself out. Then her dad got arrested, and so now she's kind of eating her words because she doesn't have the capital to buy herself out without Lamar's money. As a result of this, Jeff ends up suing her for her masters, so they have a cop come to her house. She has her masters in a safe, and she has to hand them over, and this is not something that she's really happy about because she really feels like as an artist her masters belong to her. And this is something that we see play out in the real world. We had that whole issue with Taylor Swift not owning her masters and everything that she had to do to get it back and stuff like that. And so obviously owning your masters is a huge thing. We also have Raina around this time of trying to buy herself out of her contract, trying to start Highway 65 and launch it off the ground. She starts dating Luke. The other thing I want to mention is that with her new album, Raina is told that she needs a new single. I think this information comes from Jeff. Her and Liam are convinced that they have the single, but Jeff tells them, hey, this is not going to be good. You need to find another one. And he ends up later on in the season giving her some market research that proves that the single is not going to do well and that her album is not going to do well. And so she really has to completely revamp on all of that. The next thing that we have happening is that while Scarlett is on tour with Luke, we do see her getting a visit from Gunnar and Zoe. I think Avery is there too, but I'm not 100% sure. But we see that Gunnar and Zoe are hooking up, still hooking up, and kind of trying to play it off so that nobody knows what's going on. We do see that Scarlett ends up seeing them kissing, and she's really upset about this. And the whole time that the three of them were there, she really felt like an outsider, like she wasn't part of the group. And so it was a huge betrayal for her to see them kissing and to know that her best friend wasn't able to tell her something like that and had been hiding that from her and also being distant from her because of everything that was going on with Gunnar. We do see Scarlett kind of explaining why she's upset about this. She's upset because they didn't come to her and tell her. They just kept it from her and continued to do it behind her back, and so she was really upset about that. We do see Avery and Scarlett kind of hooking up again, and after they're done or whatever, we have Juliet coming to Avery's apartment, and she's basically about to confess her love or profess her love for Avery, and she realizes that Scarlett is there, and so she has to backtrack, and we'll see how that plays out as well. So with Lamar getting arrested, we're dealing with the fallout of his arrest, and obviously we're learning more and more about his case. So we know that Tandy is the star witness, and she ends up going into hiding at some point because she has a lot of pressure on her. She can't tell Raina anything that's going on, and then she's expected to testify against her father, and so she goes into hiding from the police, and you see them like texting her and trying to get in contact with her to let her know that she needs to turn herself in. She's obviously still around her family at this point, but then she goes into hiding. And so we have Lamar convinced that Teddy is responsible for him being in jail, and so I think he ends up putting out a hit on Teddy, and as a result, Peggy ends up getting killed. And it easily could have been Raina that was killed because the way that the acting was done in this scene, you see the guy coming out from nowhere, you see him reaching for something, and you kind of know that something shady is going to go down. Teddy walks past the man, and then for some reason he ends up turning to look behind him. The man pulls out a gun. He's able to like kind of grab his arm and like basically change the path of where he's firing, and Peggy ends up getting shot. So this is obviously a very traumatizing moment for all of them because they all easily could have been killed. Obviously Teddy was the target, but with just everything as far as the plan to take out Teddy not going well, anyone could have been killed. And obviously with Peggy being killed in this way, it kind of makes her a martyr because she never has to confess to Teddy that she was faking her pregnancy. Then also with Lamar's case, we see that his case is starting to fall apart because Tandy doesn't want to testify, and then we see this meeting that she had with the cop and her lawyer, or the detective and her lawyer, and basically we know that Tandy had resigned after she had tried to take over her father's position. She didn't get demoted, but someone got promoted above her, and then she resigned. And so the date that she took the files was technically after she had resigned. And so what this means is that she basically stole corporate files, and so the evidence that she gave them was not admissible, and this is what caused Lamar's case to fall apart. We did have a bunch of people working on this. We had Teddy kind of looking into everything that was happening with Peggy, trying to trace it back to Lamar. And then we had Megan, who was Deacon's lawyer. She is representing the family of the man who tried to kill Teddy because that guy had committed suicide, and they said that he had a vendetta against Teddy in the city or whatever because he had been fired multiple times or whatever. And so they try to wrap the story up that way, but Teddy and Peggy are really trying to figure out what's going on. And so you have Teddy and Peggy kind of like working together to kind of really figure out what's happening in this situation, but beyond just Peggy being killed. So as a result of the case falling apart, we do have Lamar finally coming home, and we have Tandy really kind of like avoiding her father because she knows that she was the one who caused all of this to happen. Even though they approached her first, she was the one who gave them evidence that they used to basically charge her father. Next, we have Juliet kind of continuing to have a rough go, and I can't recall what exactly led to this, but she had a moment where basically so I think it was the Opry, Grand Ole Opry, where she performed Don't Throw Dirt on My Grave, which is a really great song, and the country music scene didn't really react well to that song, even though it wasn't necessarily directed at them. It was just directed at people who hated Juliet or misunderstood her, whatever. And so at this point, she has basically people basically protesting her and trying to cancel her and stuff like that. And so she had these religious people who are showing up and protesting her for whatever reason, I can't recall. But one of the guys, he says something about God and her mother, and so she says there isn't a God who would listen to a crackpot like you or something like that. And her words are taken out of context, where they just take her saying there is no God and they just play that over the news cycle. And obviously this is not what she said, but she's getting reamed and canceled for that even more. And she has to have Layla come to her fence because Layla was there. And Layla does do a press conference where she tells the full story of what Juliet actually said to that guy who was protesting. But this just leads to more people trying to cancel Juliet. As a result of all of this happening, Juliet's concert, um, her tour dates and stuff like that are getting canceled, and it's because people are wanting a refund for their ticket, but then also because the different venues might be getting threats or something like that, so they have to cancel the event for safety reasons. And what also happens is that Edge Hill officially drops Juliet from the label. The next thing that happens is we know that Will and Brent have some history prior to them both showing up in Nashville. And so Will basically has Brent fired because he's complaining that Brent doesn't really understand him. Brent is really his only advocate and is helping Will to be successful. But because of their intimate relations or whatever before, Will is just really concerned with someone catching on to the fact that he's gay. And so he just doesn't want Brent around him. And so he gets him fired. And this happens after they hooked up. So they had hooked up previously prior to coming to Nashville, and then Will, I guess, kind of gave in, and him and Brent hooked up, and he felt really bad about it. And so you do see this episode, the end of one episode, where Will is feeling really bad about having hooked up with Brent, and you see him on this train tracks, and the implication is that he's going to kill himself. And so this is obviously a cliffhanger. We do see it kind of play out a little bit more in the next episode, where it turns out that Will was planning to kill himself but couldn't do it, and so he's just hiding away in the mountains, and Gunnar has to go looking for him and kind of talk him into coming back and kind of just not being too hard on himself as far as how he's feeling about his situation and everything. We do have Brent coming back as Layla's manager after Layla is dropped from Edge Hill. She has a single that doesn't do well, and so Jeff is basically tired of promoting her, and so they basically, I don't know if they officially drop her from the label, but she learned via Will when he's on the phone with Jeff that she's not a priority for them anymore. And so Brent comes in as her manager, and he's able to get her kind of like a touring at smaller venues, and he's able to get Will to be part of it because Will has been dropped from Juliet's tour because of something I can't recall, but he gets dropped, and so he needs a tour to be part of. He can work with Layla, obviously, but he wants to do something bigger because he knows that he has an album coming out, and he wants to be set up for success. We also have Scarlett working on her album. She's working with Liam, and so Liam is really pushing Scarlett to kind of like figure out who she is, what she's all about, so that he can produce the best album from her for her. And he ends up reading her book of poems and stuff like that, and they talk about this song Black Roses, which is about her mother and kind of like her relationship with her mother. It's not a good relationship. We're not really given much details about it, but we just know that he doesn't have a good relationship with her mother. The other thing that happens is that we have Liam giving Scarlett his prescription medication, so this is something that she gets hooked on for the rest of season 2. We also have Scarlett and Liam getting closer romantically, and they end up making out and hanging out. And we do see Raina and Luke walking in on this, and as a result of this happening, Raina fires Liam, even though she already paid him, and kind of keeps him away from Scarlett going forward, just because she knows how that situation is going to turn out, being that she herself was just involved with Liam. One thing I want to mention with Scarlett working with Liam is that he was really pushing her, and so she was really turning to drugs to cope with all the stress that was on her, and she was just really feeling pressured to complete her album, and so that's what she wants to focus on once her and Liam go their separate ways. Then the next thing that we have happening is Lamar dies. So we see the scene where he goes to confront Teddy for basically telling Raina that Lamar had put a hit out on him, and that resulted in Peggy getting killed. And so Lamar goes to confront Teddy, and Teddy tells him that it was actually Tandy who was giving information or evidence on him. And this is a huge shock for Lamar. He ends up having another heart attack. He had one earlier in season 2, So he has his second one, and he basically dies from this second attack. Teddy let him die. He didn't call for help until like the very last minute, I guess. And so prior to this, we have Raina and Lamar having a conversation about what happened with her mother. So Tandy had found out earlier on in season 2 that Lamar was involved in their mother's death. We find out that he basically ran her off the road. She was leaving him, he was chasing after her, trying to bring her back, and she sped up, he sped up, and then somehow she went off the road, and he realized that she was dead and left her there. And so, as a result of all of this coming out, um, learning the truth about her mother's death, learning that he did in fact put out a hit on Teddy, she tells her dad that he's dead to her, and then literally maybe like the next day or two, he's dead. The other thing that I want to talk about with Lamar dying is that we know that Teddy and Megan have gotten really close just because they were working on the case for Peggy's murder, and he confides into her that he basically didn't help Lamar, and so they're getting closer. She's really trying to walk him through this journey of grief because she herself has already lost a spouse, and so they end up sleeping together over this bond that they have, and she feels really guilty about it, but Teddy is continually kind of like trying to talk to her and get her to not deny that they have something between them and all of this stuff. And so we have Deacon actually finding out about that while on tour. The next thing that we have happening is that Avery, Zoe, and Gunnar, they form a band, but it kind of falls apart because Avery doesn't want to commit to this long term because Gunnar is trying to make it a job, and then we also have Zoe, who's really trying to get her big break, and she wants to become a backup singer, and so she doesn't know that she's going to be able to commit to this long term because she may get a gig that takes her out of town, and so she wants to keep her options open. We do see Gunnar getting a check for 400K, which is really crazy. This is his royalties just from Ball and Chain, and so he's able to use this money to buy a house. And then he also gets an offer to work with Jeff, but he doesn't take the offer because of something that Jeff says that we'll talk about later on against Scarlett. And then he also gets an offer to work with Juliet, and that offer is kind of compromised. That's something that Juliet does to Avery. The next thing that happens is we have Juliet signing with Highway 65. So we kind of saw this coming. We know that Highway 65 is supposed to be a refuge for artists so that they can be who they want to be themselves, and make the music that they want to make. And we know that this is the right place for Juliet because Edge Hill is not letting her do what she wants to do. And then she's also, being that they dropped her, she is not willing to be touched by other labels. And so obviously Highway 65 is the only place for her to go. We do see her get buzz from working with Howie B, who left a review on her song that she performed, Don't Throw Dirt on My Grave, at the Grand Ole Opry. And so he writes a good review about her, I think, and then he tries to work with her to produce like a different version of that song, and then they have this really crazy, wild photo shoot session going on. And so as a result of all of that, she's able to get offers from other labels, and she really wants to be in Nashville in the country music scene, and so this leads to her going to Highway 65. We do see this moment where once Juliet has signed with Highway 65, she kind of has a gag order on her. She's not allowed to talk about it just because being associated with her is not really a good look. And so Raina and her team, they want to have a strategic rollout of how they will introduce Juliet to Highway 65 officially in the press. Raina is having an event for her single, and Juliet is at the event, and she doesn't like how she's basically being dismissed and how she's hearing about Raina brag about all of the other artists on Highway 65, and so she ends up taking the stage announcing that she's signed to Highway 65, and this puts Raina in a bad situation because now she's getting bad press for being associated with Juliet. So what happens as a result of this is that Scarlett ends up being the opening act for Juliet, and we also have Scarlett needing to work on her album with Avery while she's touring with Juliet, and so this is just a lot on Scarlett because at this point Scarlett knows that she doesn't want to she doesn't want to perform. She's not really into this. She just wants to finish her album. And so she has a lot of stress on her at this point. We also do see a really telling scene where at this point we know that Scarlett is still taking those pills, and then I think she's starting to mix alcohol with that. We do have this moment where they're celebrating at an after party, and Julia is walking away from Scarlett with Avery, and she's telling Avery that Scarlett seems off. She seems like she's high or something like that. And so I thought that that was very telling because of the fact that you're seeing these tiny crumbs that something is wrong with Scarlett, and Julia is able to pick up on it, but she's not the right person to help Scarlett in that moment. Later on, we do see this moment where Julia is just not the right person to help Scarlett in this moment, and we'll get to that in a little bit later. We do have Luke's concert, and so we have Luke finding out about Megan and Teddy while he is on tour with Luke, and he ends up overhearing them talking, and then he kind of forces Teddy to kind of admit to what's going on. And then we have Deacon really spiraling. He goes to his house, he packs up everything. Megan is there and trying to convince him not to throw everything away, and so we see Deacon disappear. We also have Teddy, who around the same time, he is really trying to keep Maddie focused on school. He's trying to punish her by taking away her music and stuff like that and her connection to Deacon in order to make her focus on school. And what happens as a result of this is that Maddie ends up posting a video of her singing, and she basically titles the video Maddie Claiborne, and so obviously this is very telling because her name should be Maddie Conrad, so why is she using the name Claiborne? And she doesn't get a lot of views on this video, like enough to create buzz about the fact that she's using the wrong last name, but it is a big deal that she's posted this kind of video because she is drawing public attention to the fact that there's something going on behind the scenes as far as the family dynamics. So while we're at Luke's concert, we have Maddie and Daphne being introduced to Luke's son, and they end up kind of performing or doing a little song, and they do some sort of clapping thing to create a beat. And Luke's son is fascinated by this, so he like records them doing that, and they post a video online. And then the parents come in, they see it, they make them take down the video, and then we have Daphne kind of letting it slip that they have 400 views on some video. And later on, we see Maddie and Luke's son. They're talking about something, and they're talking about how Maddie's dad is cool. And then he's like, "Oh, well, isn't your dad the mayor? Didn't you say he grounded you and whatever?" And so she's saying, you know, my real dad or whatever. And so I guess Luke's son ends up going to Luke and showing him the video that Maddie posted with her name titled as Maddie Claiborne. And so Luke is upset by this because he ends up showing the video to Raina, and he does this after Raina and Teddy and I think Deacon kind of get into an argument about how long the girls can stay at the concert. And so Luke is like, "Oh, now I see why Deacon is so involved in everything." And she's like, "Well, what do you mean by that?" And he ends up showing her the video that Maddie posted, and then he makes the connection that Deacon is Maddie's father. And what really annoyed me about this was how upset Luke was about not knowing that Deacon was Maddie's father. I don't feel like this was something that Raina needed to tell him. It's not something that he should have been hurt by, and we do find out that he is hurt by this because he basically wanted Raina to choose him over Deacon back then when her and Deacon were actually dating. And so I do understand where he's coming from with that, but I do think that it was not his place to even be upset about the fact that Deacon was Maddie's father. And he does later on come over to Raina and he kind of apologizes for his reaction, which I thought was good for him to do because he had no right to be upset about that to begin with. The next thing that we have happening is that Will is really trying to keep his lifestyle under wraps. He doesn't want it to come out that he's gay, and so he proposes to Leia as kind of like his cover of showing that he's happy with women. He's into women enough to marry one, and he really believes that he can be a good husband to Layla, despite the fact that he's really conflicted about the fact that he's gay. We do see Jeff kind of acknowledging that there's rumors about Will. He does go to Gunner and ask him straight up about Will's sexuality, Gunnar obviously denies this, which is good. He tells him, he sleeps around with a lot of girls, so there's no way that he's gay, basically. And so, Will finds out about this, and him and Layla end up eloping. They do this because Layla's getting threats to be disowned by her family if she gets married because she's too young. And then Will is really desperate to cover up his lifestyle, that he wants to get married as quickly as possible. We also see Layla and Will getting approached about a reality show, and Layla is really pitching this reality show as something that's good for both of their careers. Will doesn't really want to do it because he is just not crazy about the idea of a reality show. Gunnar, who lives with him, he's not crazy about being on a reality show, so he's not willing to sign a release so that his footage of him can be used in the show. And then we also have Layla kind of like um, trying to convince Will to do it. And then we do see a conversation between Will and Jeff where basically Jeff tells Will that he knows that he's gay. He doesn't say it because he wants to be able to deny knowing that. And so he tells him that being on a reality show is not going to be good for Will, and that it's way too much exposure for what he's trying to keep hidden. And Will is rebelling against what Jeff has said to him, and he agrees to do the reality show. The downside of him doing the reality show is that he's really struggling to keep up this facade that he has going with Layla. It's completely different when he's like playing it up just for Layla and kind of trying to convince everyone else. But when you have cameras into your home and you're having to keep that up 24/7, that is a lot on Will, and it's causing him to break down. We do see this moment where he's at the gym, he's trying to let off steam, and he ends up being approached by this male trainer. I don't know how exactly the trainer knew that it was okay to approach Will. Obviously, he's talking about giving him training lessons, but they were also speaking in code about hooking up. And so I just thought that was interesting. And we do see that Will later on ends up calling that guy and they hang out and whatever. So we really do see Will struggling with this, and he eventually comes out to Layla and tells her that he's gay. Being that they're on a reality show, they do have cameras all over the house. There's not supposed to be cameras in the bedroom, but we do see the camera pan to a clock that has two kind of like cutouts for camera, and there's a red light flashing, so we know that they have on camera him confessing to Layla that he's gay. Next, what we have happening is that news breaks out about Maddie. So she did take down the video after her and Raina had that conversation about why the video wasn't a good idea. Maddie was convinced that her mom was like ashamed of how Maddie came to be born and all of that stuff, but it was really just about the fact that people knowing, the public knowing about her paternity or whatever, it was going to create a lot of attention, and it did. And so Maddie did agree to take the video down, but because Luke's son had seen the video, somehow his friend got a hold of it and they reposted the video. So we do see maybe the next day or a few days, a few weeks later, whatever, the story actually picks up, and we see that everyone is talking about the fact that Deacon is Maddie's father. We see them being swarmed by press at their school. We see one reporter trying to grab Maddie's backpack, which is really crossing the line. He shouldn't have even tried to touch children. So we see how crazy this is for all of them. They do end up doing a Good Morning America interview where they're kind of addressing the rumors out there and explaining why Maddie did that video. And so Deacon is not wanting to come to this interview because he is obviously upset about what Teddy has done with Peggy. And so he has gone to his cabin to kind of like get away from the noise and all of that stuff. And so he has no idea that the news has broken about Maddie because of that video that she posted. And so we do see Raina and Luke. They go to Deacon's house to express there. His car is not there, and so they go to his cabin to see just what's going on with him. They're not sure what they're gonna find, and so it is there that Deacon learns that the news has broke, that everyone knows about Maddie, and then we have Raina trying to figure out why he's so upset if he didn't know about the news, and this forces her to have a conversation with Teddy, and she and Teddy are just going back and forth about basically how Teddy is making bad decisions that impact their family. As a result of this news breaking, we do see kind of Maddie and Deacon able to get closer. We know that Teddy was kind of trying to take away her music lesson and kind of limit her time with Deacon, but she's able to get more time with Deacon outside of guitar lesson, and she even starts to spend the night, which is really good because it allows them to develop their father-daughter connection. We do see this moment where Maddie asked Deacon where he was when she was born, and he tells her that he was on the road. We do see him later at what I would assume is an AA meeting, and he tells them the truth that he was out drinking, that he was sleeping around, and that he basically wasn't in a good place when Maddie was born because he thought that Maddie was another man's child, and so he wasn't happy about her being born. And so obviously he knows that he can't say that to her, but he just tells her that he was on the road, and it's really big that he admits this to the people at the AA meeting because he was really mad about his own daughter being born, and because of his actions as far as him being an alcoholic and just not being in a good place to be a father, to be a husband, and stuff like that to Raina and Maddie, he lost out on the chance to be there for his daughter's birth and to be there as she was growing up. And obviously he was there, but he was there as her uncle, as someone that she saw kind of informally and kind of like in passing and wasn't super close with. Like, she was close enough to know who he was and interact with him, but their relationship obviously would have been much different if they had known that they were father and daughter. I just want to go back to this. We do see after the Good Morning America interview, Raina and Deacon are talking at his cabin, and he's really just telling her that he's not able to get over the fact that she's been lying to him, the fact that he only found out because Maddie told him, and if Maddie hadn't told him, he would still not know that Maddie was his daughter, and so he's really upset with Raina, and Raina just hits him back with letting him know that she resents him a lot more than he resents her for not telling him about Maddie because his actions prevented them from having the life that she wanted. She wanted to be married to him. She wanted to have children with him, and because of how he was behaving, they weren't able to live that life. And so I'm glad that she was able to tell him that because it wasn't all about Deacon being hurt about finding out about his daughter 13 years later. We do see this kind of coming full circle at a event at another one of Luke's concerts. We do see Raina and Deacon having this conversation, and he basically apologizes for lashing out at Raina and understanding that she made the best decision for herself and their daughter at their time, and they kind of make their peace with the situation. The other thing that we have happening is that we do have Scarlett on tour with Juliet, and we have her mom coming to visit, and we understand right away that her mom is abusive. This is not a good relationship. And then we have this moment where the news has broken about Maddie and Deacon, and Beverly, who is Scarlett's mom, she's seeing this on the news, and she's angry that Scarlett knew and didn't tell her, and then she's angry about being kept out of the loop. And we see this moment where she's like pinching Scarlett, and she's actually hurting her, and she's just lashing out and stuff like that, and just really being mean to Scarlett. We also see this moment where we have Beverly with Scarlett, and she's at sound check, and she's off singing with the band, and we understand right away that she was a performer. She had her chance to shine, and she's really upset that Scarlett is living the life that she feels she should have been living. And so we have Scarlett coming out and hearing her mom perform, and it's at the end of her mom's performance, and so it's time for Scarlett to have her sound check, and she sings Black Rose. And I feel like this was the most powerful moment of the show because we know that Scarlett is very sensitive, we know that she's very polite, we know that she has made herself small so that other people feel bigger, other people feel more important. But this moment is really impactful because she's one singing a song that is talking about her relationship with her mother and is calling her mother out for not being a good parent, basically. And we see how angry she gets as she's singing these lyrics, and that was really powerful because, again, there's not that many moments where you see her really standing up for herself and going off on people, and just seeing the look on her face, seeing the way that she was shouting basically the lyric, and seeing her mom's reaction to all of that was very powerful. What I didn't like about this scene is that instead of realizing the damage that she's done to her daughter, after that performance, they kind of like go off stage, and we see Beverly kind of lashing out at Scarlett. She's pinching her again, she's grabbing her really hard, and she's basically telling her that she is living the life that she should have been living. Her life was a picnic compared to what her mother went through, and that she doesn't deserve her talent and stuff like that. And so she's really traumatizing Scarlett all over again. What this leads to is we have this scene where Scarlett goes to Juliet and she has asked her for a break. I do want to touch on one moment before this. So earlier on in the tour, we have this moment where Juliet is performing and she's upset that Avery and Scarlett were not watching. She's upset that Avery was not watching. And the reason why Avery was not watching is because he was helping Scarlett with her album. And so we see Scarlett perform after that, and then she performed a song in defiance of the instructions or whatever that Juliet has given her. And so they end up having this conversation in the dressing room, and basically Scarlett is telling Juliet that she wants her to fire her because all she wants to do is work on her album. She doesn't want to perform, but Juliet refuses to fire her because she knows that this is a good way to punish Scarlett by making her do something that she doesn't want to do. And so now we have Scarlett coming to Juliet a second time, asking for a day off, asking to be able to mentally recover from everything that she's been through and having to interact with her mother. And so we would obviously expect Juliet to understand where Scarlett is coming from given her own relationship with her mother, but we see, because we know that Juliet has had to create her own opportunities, she has had to persevere through everything that she's been through. We see her tell Scarlett that there's no days off. You're not Dairy Queen. You can't just switch your shift. You're the opener. You need to open. And so he essentially forces Scarlett to perform. We do have Scarlett going to her performance. Prior to that, she was drinking, mixing pills, and we see her going to her performance. She's talking to Avery. She's slurring her words. She's clearly drunk, and we see Avery is very alarmed. He's telling somebody to get Juliet, and he's trying to like figure out what's going on with Scarlett. Then we see Scarlett kind of interacting with Charles, who is there for Juliet, because Juliet wanted him to get more press at her event, and he tried to kiss her, and she told Avery about that. And so now we're seeing Scarlett and Charles interacting. Avery doesn't like this, on top of all of the concerning things that he's seeing from Scarlett. And so he tells Charles to get away from Scarlett, to leave her alone. She's not in the right frame of mind, blah, blah, blah. And so we see Scarlett using this opportunity to kind of make her way to the stage, and she goes onto the stage. She's at first very bubbly, but then she starts to break down because she's looking at the crowd. She sees her mother in the crowd. It's obviously like a hallucination or whatever. She sees her mother in the crowd, and she's very triggered by that, and she completely loses it. She starts shouting, why are you doing this to me? And then all of these different things that she's saying. So it's very clear to everybody that something is wrong. And then we see at one point, we see her mother kind of lunging at her. Obviously, there's no one there, but she is reacting to that lunging from her mother, and she hides under the piano, and we see Avery kind of rush out on stage to get her because he knows, okay, we need to stop this, there's something wrong. And so they end up getting her off stage, and they take her I think they take her back to Nashville. Basically, they sedate her on the plane, they take her back to Nashville, and then they have Raina and Deacon waiting for her to get her checked into a clinic. And what really annoys me about this scene is that Avery knew her relationship with her mother. We have Juliet, who knew that something was wrong with Scarlett. We had Deacon, who knew what his sister was like, and then we had Raina, who should know what Deacon's sister was like, being that she dated Deacon. And so I was really, really annoyed how much after she had that breakdown on stage, I was really annoyed by how much they allowed Beverly to continue to be around Scarlett because she was what triggered her. And so it was really annoying and very frustrating and very concerning for me that she was basically forced to continue to interact with her mother when she couldn't defend herself. She couldn't speak. She couldn't state what she wanted, and her mother was forcing herself on her and pretending to be like this doting, caring parent, which she wasn't. And so we see when she's at the clinic, her mother is talking to the doctors and telling them, hey, this has happened in our family. You need to do everything you can for her, blah, blah, blah. And then she starts going off on Raina and blaming Raina for whatever. Raina tells her that she's the wrong one to tangle with. And then we see this moment where Beverly and Deacon are at home, and they get into an argument about how Deacon left and how Beverly could have left as well, but she chose to stay with the guy, then got pregnant, and then basically she's resents Deacon because he left her, but she had the same opportunities to leave that he did. And so we see Scarlett kind of recovering from all of this, and she has no idea what happened. And so Juliet comes to her and is trying to like talk to her, be buddy buddy, and kind of like get to the bottom of everything. And Scarlett is not having it. She immediately calls Juliet out for forcing her to go on stage, and then we see Juliet leave, and then we see kind of Scarlett watching the video and realizing what happened on stage. It wasn't just like that she was confused for a minute, it was that she had a complete and utter breakdown. Ultimately, what this leads to is Raina letting Scarlett out of her contract, and Scarlett kind of has to figure out what she's going to do from here. She does try to go back to working at the Bluebird, but then she realizes that this is not going to be for her because there's people who are going to recognize her, wonder why she's not singing, and all of this stuff, and then she ends up deciding to go back to Mississippi. The next thing that we have happening is that Juliet sleeps with Jeff, so she's really upset about all of the attention that Avery is giving Scarlett. She overhears basically not them confessing or professing their love for each other, but they're just basically saying, because we dated, because we have this history, you will always have a place in my heart, basically. And so Juliet doesn't like hearing this, and she ends up sleeping with Jeff at some party, and she's basically upset with Avery because she was given a contract to come back to Edge Hill that included a producing deal for Avery, but he didn't want to get that deal by being associated with her. And so she was upset when he then took on the gig to help produce Scarlett's album, and he just really didn't see the two as the same situation. But Juliet was really upset by this, and so she hooks up with Jeff, and she obviously really regrets this, but Jeff uses this against her and tries to blackmail her and get her back to Edge Hill by basically taunting her and letting her know that Avery's not going to be happy about this, and that the only way to keep Avery from knowing is by going back to Edge Hill. And so we see Jeff is calling Avery and stuff like that, and Juliet is freaking out. And then obviously we know that Gunnar has seen Juliet and Jeff together, and he knows that they hooked up. And so we see this conversation between Gunnar and Zoe where he tells Zoe about what happened. They agree that he should be the one to tell Gunnar, but then Zoe gets her own gig singing back up to Juliet, and just as he's about to tell Avery, he kind of crashes the party and tells him her news, and then kind of like separates them to celebrate her news, and so they don't tell Avery at that moment. We do have another event that happened, and Avery confronts Gunnar and Zoe for being weird with him, and they end up telling him about Juliet and Jeff. And so Juliet and Avery have this whole conversation about what happened. Juliet talks about how she feels like nobody really loves her, nobody really sees her, and she doesn't want to be alone, and their relationship is kind of left up in limbo. The next thing that we have happening is the concert for the army. We had Luke, who was injured in Afghanistan, that he was supposed to do an event there, but he got injured and was flown back to the United States. Raina suggested having a concert for a local army base in Nashville, and so Raina sees this as a great opportunity for Juliet to perform. Luke doesn't like this because Juliet has obviously had a lot of bad press, and so he and Raina get into it over this, and and Juliet also overhears it, and so she's like, okay, great, I won't perform, whatever. And so we do see this moment where Juliet is interacting with a soldier who's in a wheelchair, and she talks about how her dad was in the army and just how she grew up in that lifestyle. Obviously, he died when she was 4, so she wasn't on a military base or whatever for long, but she grew up around the military, and so she had a great respect for it. And so Luke overhears this conversation, and he actually welcomes Juliet back into the lineup. They perform her song together, and it's a really good win for Juliet in that moment. At that same event, we have Raina, Daphne, and Maddie performing together. They're singing one of Deacon's songs, A Life That's Good, and Maddie really wants Deacon to sing with him, and so Raina's kind of forced to call him on stage, and so you have the 4 of them singing together, looking like a family. We have Luke reacting badly to it, and we have Teddy reacting badly to it. I've been calling Teddy a little B this whole season. He's been really annoying for me, and so I've been really happy kind of when he's been put in his place at the expense of Maddie being able to have this relationship with her father. One of the last things that we have happening is that we have an LP concert for Raina. So this is a concert that she's having that is helping with her album sales or whatever, so that she can debut at #1. And so she had this really huge concert. She performed with Juliet. She performed with Luke, and her and Luke are performing Ball and Chain. And he ends up proposing to her, and we see the immediate reaction from her family. We see Teddy and Daphne are kind of confused and hurt by this. We see Maddie really upset by this, and we see Deacon who's really upset by this because obviously he still loves Raina. Teddy is not upset about the. I feel like Teddy's not really like still in love with Raina or whatever, but I think the shock of the fact that Luke probably didn't ask any of them for permission to do this in such a public way and kind of put them all on the spot and in a uncomfortable situation. And so I really wasn't happy about that. Obviously, Raina said yes because he proposed on stage and all of that stuff, but I was really unhappy with how that went down because that was a huge moment to blindside the kids with, not necessarily Deacon, but just the fact of her kids and not letting them know what was going on because that's a huge change in their relationship. They already had a huge change with Maddie and Deacon, and their relationship coming out, and so her getting married to another man is very complicated, especially when Luke has his own history with Deacon. And then lastly, we end this episode with Deacon going to Raina's house. He professes his love for her, tells her that he's the man for her, that they should be together, and that he's not going to pressure her to make a decision. And then the episode ends and the season ends. So to wrap up, this is a super long video, but again, season 2 was just as great as season 1. I'm really happy that I have started watching this show. I can't wait to continue going on to season 3. I'm actually going to start season 3 after I finish recording this episode, and I can't wait to learn more about what happens as far as the storylines in Nashville. And I definitely really hope that Scarlett stays in Nashville because I don't even know what the show would be like without her. I also hope that we get some closure with Deacon and Raina as far as like what the relationship is going to be. Will they or won't they? And then obviously I hope that Maddie continues to develop her relationship with Deacon, that it grows stronger. And then I really hope that Teddy can kind of get it together and stop doing reckless things to hurt other people, especially his family. And so yeah, we just have a lot going on. I also hope that we do have a good storyline as far as Will. He did out that he was gay to Layla. It was recorded. We don't know how that recording is going to be used. So I'm a little bit scared for him going into season 3, but I hope that he does have a good storyline, a good strong storyline, and that he's able to survive everything that is surely going to be thrown at him. So yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up this episode, and thank you guys for listening.